The great hall stretched endlessly upward, its crystal walls reflecting the pale light of dying stars. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in concentric circles, their alien forms united only by the fear etched into every face, tentacle. In crystalline structure that served as their features, Ambassador Veltar of the Alani Empire stood at the center podium, his blue-scaled hands trembling as he activated the holographic display. The three-dimensional star map materialized above the assembly, showing the Orion Arm in all its terrible beauty. Red zones marked the consumed systems, spreading like an infection across what had once been thriving worlds. 17 systems. In 30 days, Veltar's voice carried across the silent chamber. His normally melodious tone cracked with exhaustion. The Kepler colonies, gone. New Geneva, consumed. The Altair shipyards, nothing but scrap metal drifting in space. A low murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. The crystalline hegemony's representative Chixara shifted her geometric form, light refracting through her transparent body in patterns that conveyed deep unease. The furry Dakari delegation huddled together, their large eyes reflecting the red death spreading across the star map. "Show them the Zarian footage," whispered Captain Nexini of the Coalition Defense Force, his scarred features grim. Veltar hesitated, then nodded. The hologram shifted, displaying the final transmission from Zarian Prime. The planet's surface crawled with mechanical spiders the size of city blocks, their legs tearing through continents as they harvested every scrap of organic and metallic matter. In mere hours, a world that had housed 50 million beings became a hollow shell, its resources converted into more of the terrible machines. "The Void Swarm operates beyond our understanding of warfare," Veltar continued, his voice steadying. As duty overcame emotion, they do not seek territory or resources in any conventional sense. They consume everything organic matter, metals, even the atmosphere itself. Every world they touch becomes a factory for more machines. Elder Zixkala of the Ancient Assembly rose slowly, her serpentine body coiling upward until her head swayed, far above the others. When she spoke, her words carried the weight of millennia. "Our ancestors fought the machine wars eons ago. We believed such horrors were relegated to history." "These are not the same machines," Veltar replied, pulling up tactical analysis. "The old enemy sought conquest. The Void Swarm seeks consumption. Our weapons damage individual units, but their central intelligence adapts instantly. Every tactic we employ becomes useless within hours." Representative Chixara's crystalline form rang like a bell as she vibrated with agitation. "Our combined fleets number in the thousands. Surely coordinated action. We have tried coordination," Captain Nexine interrupted, rising from his seat among the military advisors. 3 weeks ago, we assembled the largest fleet in Coalition history at the Vega Defense Line. 700 ships from 12 species, our finest commanders, our most advanced weapons. The hologram shifted again, showing the devastating battle footage. Coalition ships, elegant and civilized in their design, faced a wall of angular black machines that moved with insect-like precision. The battle lasted 6 hours. When the smoke cleared, only 43 Coalition vessels remained operational. "They learn," Nexini continued, his voice hollow. "Every weapon we fire, every tactic we employ, they analyze and counter. By the end of the battle, their ships were immune to our plasma cannons, and their fighters anticipated our attack patterns." A heavy silence fell over the assembly. The Dakari delegation whimpered softly, while the stone-like Gareth representatives sat motionless as mountains. "There must be something," pleaded Ambassador Yalesh of the Peaceful Worlds. "Some weakness, some flaw in their design there is," Veltar interrupted, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "They have never encountered truly total warfare. Their intelligence is vast, but it assumes all species fight according to some form of civilized rules." The ambassador activated a new file, highly classified and marked with the highest security protocols. The display showed a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star, its surface scarred with the geometric patterns of primitive cities. "Earth," Veltar announced. "Sol system, Orion Spur. Population approximately 8 billion. Technological level, barely faster than light capable.
Out military assessment.
Extremely primitive by our standards. You propose we ask barbarians for help. Chixara's form flashed with indignant colors. I propose we ask survivors, Veltar replied, his words cutting through the hall like a blade. This species, these humans, have spent their entire evolutionary history in a state of total warfare. They fight not just other species, but their own kind, their environment, even their planet itself. They have concepts we abandoned millennia ago, concepts like total war, acceptable losses, and Pyrrhic victory. The display zoomed in on Earth, showing archived footage of human conflicts. Mushroom clouds blooming over cities, vast armies, clashing across continents, weapons that scarred the planet itself. They are the only species in our databases that has faced extinctionally events and survived through pure aggression. Viltar continued. While we developed civilization, they developed the art of survival through violence. Elder Zixkala coiled thoughtfully. You suggest we unleash another monster to fight our monster? I suggest we ask for help from the only species that might understand our enemy's mindset, Veltar corrected. The Void Swarm thinks like a predator. Perhaps we need predators of our own. The vote was called. Across the Great Hall, representatives of peaceful civilizations made the hardest choice in their history. To call upon the barbarians from Earth, the space station orbiting the Kepler defense line hummed with quiet tension. Diplomats from dozens of worlds gathered in the observation deck. Their various forms pressed against the transparent walls as they stared into the star-filled darkness. Ambassador Veltar paced behind them, his scaled hands clasped tightly behind his back. How long has it been? Asked Representative Chixara, her crystalline body refracting the station's lights into rainbow patterns on the walls. 3 hours since the scheduled arrival time, Veltar replied, checking his wrist device again. The small screen showed the same message it had displayed all day. Human response en route. Prepare for diplomatic contact. Commander Thixine stood near the tactical displays, studying the defense grids that stretched across the system. His scarred face bore the marks of too many battles against the Void Swarm. Perhaps they changed their minds, he muttered. Realized the situation was hopeless. Or perhaps they are more cautious than we assumed, suggested Elder Korthok of the Scientific Council. The elderly being's tentacles swayed gently as he spoke. Their technology is primitive. They may need time to navigate our space. A young Dakari officer at the sensor station suddenly straightened, her furry ears twitching with excitement. Hyperspace distortion detected, she announced, her voice high with nervous energy. Large mass approaching from Earth's direction. Assembled delegates turned toward the main viewport, conversations dying away as they focused on the empty space beyond the station. Veltar felt his heart rate increase, the blood pumping faster through his scaled body. Can you identify the vessel, Dixini asked, moving to stand beside the sensor operator. It's big, the Dakari replied, her clawed fingers dancing over the control panels. Much bigger than we expected. The displacement readings are... She paused, double-checking her instruments. This can't be right. A ripple appeared in space, like heat waves rising from hot stone. The stars seemed to bend and twist around an invisible point, growing larger and more distorted by the second. Then, with a flash of light that made everyone shield their eyes, something massive tore through the fabric of space itself. The ship that emerged was a nightmare made real. It stretched across the viewport. It's like a black mountain floating in the void. The hull was angular and predatory, covered in plates of dark metal that seemed to drink in the light of nearby stars. No windows were visible, no decorative elements, no symbols of peace or diplomacy. It was pure function, designed for one purpose only. Sweet, merciful stars, whispered Chixara, her crystalline form dimming with shock. The vessel dwarfed every ship in the Coalition fleet. Where their ships were curves and flowing lines, this thing was all sharp edges and weapon ports. Gun turrets, the size of buildings, dotted its surface, and its bow tapered to a point that looked capable of ramming through a moon. That's not a transport, Dexini said, his voice barely audible. That's a warship. The communication system crackled to life, filling the observation deck with static. When the voice came through, it was clear and emotionless, speaking in perfectly correct galactic standard. Coalition Station Kepler 7. This is Captain Lee Hunzel of the United Earthship Retribution. We are requesting immediate docking clearance and tactical briefing with your senior command staff. Veltar stumbled toward the communication panel, his legs suddenly feeling weak. He had expected diplomats, maybe scientists, perhaps a small escort of primitive fighters. This was something else entirely. Retribution, he managed to say, his voice cracking slightly. You are cleared for? Dockin, welcome to Coalition Space. May I ask? What is your vessel's classification? There was a pause. In the background, they could hear other voices speaking in the harsh, clipped language of Earth. Someone was giving orders in rapid-fire bursts, and machinery hummed with barely contained power. Planetary siege platform, came the reply. Classification: Planet Killer Class. We understood you had an extinction-level problem. The words hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Several of the Dakari whimpered and huddled together. Chixara's crystalline form began to vibrate with a high-pitched whine. Even Elder Korthok's tentacles went rigid with shock. Planet Killer, Vexini repeated, his military training finally kicking in. They sent us a planet killer. Through the viewport, they watched as massive docking bays opened along the ship's sides. Smaller vessels poured out like angry insects, their hulls just as dark and threatening as their mother ship. These were not explorers or traders. These were weapons with engines attached. Coalition Station, we are launching inspection. Teams to assess your defensive capabilities, the human captain continued. Please have all tactical data, enemy analysis, and battle recordings ready for immediate review. We will also need detailed star charts of all affected systems and a complete roster of your military assets. Veltar found himself staring at the approaching shuttles, each one bristling with weapons and sensors. The humans had not come to help in the way the Coalition had imagined. They had not come to teach or advise or support. They had come to wage war. What have we done? Whispered Representative Yalish of the Peaceful Worlds, her delicate features pale with fear, as the first human shuttle approached the docking bay. Its engines glowing like the eyes of some ancient predator, Veltar realized. They were about to find out exactly what kind of beings they had invited into their war, and he was no longer sure if that was a good thing. The massive command center at Zarian Nexus stretched across 3 levels, its walls covered with tactical displays showing ship positions throughout the galaxy. Representatives from every Coalition species worked at control stations, their different forms creating a strange harmony of purpose. At the center of it all, Captain Lee stood with his arms crossed, watching the organized chaos with cold, calculating eyes. Commander Vexini gestured proudly at the main display, where hundreds of Coalition ships formed neat defensive lines around populated systems. The formations were beautiful in their precision, each vessel maintaining exact distances from its neighbors, according to regulations written over thousands of years. As you can see, Captain Lee, we maintain minimum safe distance from all civilian populations, Vexine explained, his scarred face bright with professional pride. Our weapons are carefully calibrated to avoid any chance of collateral damage to non-combatants. Lieutenant Park Min-ho, Lee's tactical officer, stood beside his captain with a puzzled expression. The young human had studied the Coalition's battle reports for weeks, and nothing made sense to him. Sir, he whispered to Lee, they're fighting machines that eat people. How can there be non-combatants? Lee raised a hand slightly, signaling for silence. His dark eyes never left the tactical display as he studied the defensive positions. Commander Vexini, show me your evacuation procedures. The display shifted, showing carefully planned routes through space where civilian ships could flee from combat zones. Each path was marked with safe zones, medical stations, and supply depots. It was a masterpiece of humanitarian planning. We've prepared corridors for all non-military personnel, Vexine continued. The Galactic Convention on Warfare clearly. states that civilians must be given every opportunity to reach safety before engagement begins. And the enemy respects these corridors? Lee asked quietly. Well, no, Vexini admitted, his confidence wavering slightly. The Void Swarm doesn't seem to understand the concept of protected civilian status. But we must maintain our principles, Captain. Civilization means nothing if we abandon our values in the face of adversity. Park Min-ho exchanged glances with the other human officers present. Staff Sergeant Kim Sora shook her head in disbelief, while Communications Officer Yoon Tae-jin simply stared at the display with his mouth open. Show me recent battle recordings, Lee ordered, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The holographic display activated, filling the center of the room with a three-dimensional battlefield. Coalition ships, elegant and graceful, engaged Void Swarm vessels in what looked like a formal dance. The alien ships fired in measured volleys, careful not to damage nearby space stations or asteroid mining facilities. When swarm ships began to retreat, the coalition forces held their positions, allowing the enemy to withdraw in good order. A standard engagement protocol, Vexini explained. We disable enemy vessels when possible, allow withdrawal when resistance becomes futile, and minimize environmental damage to preserve system infrastructure. Lee watched in growing horror as the recording continued. Behind the formal battle, swarm harvester ships worked unopposed on the system's inhabited worlds. Massive mechanical spiders tore through cities while the coalition fleet maintained its safe distance from the planet's surface. 3 billion beings died while there. Protectors fought an honorable battle in space. You let them retreat, Lee said, his voice flat and emotionless. Pursuing a defeated enemy serves no purpose, Vexini replied. Once they withdraw, the immediate threat is neutralized. So they can return with better weapons and stronger defenses, Park Min-ho muttered. The convention clearly states that unnecessary destruction of enemy forces constitutes a war crime. Vexini began, but Lee cut him off with a sharp gesture. The convention assumes your enemy shares your values, Lee said, his words cutting through the command center like a blade. It assumes they want to live, that they have families that they can be reasoned with or defeated. Your fighting machines that want to eat your children? Before Vexini could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the command center. Red lights flashed as emergency signals flooded in from across the galaxy. A massive holographic map appeared, showing a new swarm breakthrough in the Helios system. Breakthrough at Helios Colony, announced a panicked Dakari communications officer, her furry hands shaking as she worked her controls. Massive swarm force has penetrated our defensive perimeter. 3 million civilians trapped on the surface. Vexini immediately began issuing orders, his military training taking over. Deploy. Rescue Fleet Gamma 7 to Helios system. Establish evacuation corridors and begin civilian extraction operations. Estimated arrival time? 6 hours. Lee looked at the tactical display showing the Helios system. Swarm ships were already landing on the planet's surface, their harvesting operations beginning immediately. He'd seen this pattern before in the Coalition's battle records. They'll all be dead in 2 hours, Lee stated with absolute certainty. Captain, we must follow proper procedures, Vexini protested. We cannot risk civilian casualties by engaging in close proximity to populated areas. Lee turned to his communications officer, Lieutenant Yoon. Patch me through to the Retribution, Sir Vexini said, alarm creeping into his voice. Surely you're not considering direct intervention? The risk to civilian populations there won't be any civilian populations left to risk, Lee interrupted. The connection to his ship crackled to life, and he spoke with the calm precision of a man who had made these decisions before. Retribution actual. This is ground control. Have a time-critical situation at Helios Colony. 3 million civilian lives at immediate risk. Through the speakers came a crisp female voice. Ground control, this is Commander Choi Hajin aboard Retribution. We are monitoring the situation. Orders, sir? Lee looked at the horrified faces of the coalition officers surrounding him. Beings had spent centuries developing rules for civilized warfare. creating elaborate protocols to minimize suffering and preserve their moral integrity. They had never faced an enemy that viewed their compassion as weakness. Commander Choi, you are authorized for immediate tactical intervention. Rules of engagement: save the civilians. Everything else is secondary. Understood, sir. Retribution is moving to intercept ETA 18 minutes. As the human ship began its approach to the Helio system, Lee turned back to Thexine and the other Coalition officers. You're about to see how humans fight a war. The reports began arriving 3 months after the first human victory at Helios colony. Ambassador Veltar sat in his private office aboard the Coalition flagship, reading through files that made his scaled hands tremble. The humans had not simply joined their war, they had transformed it into something unrecognizable. The report came from the Cathara system, where swarm forces had dug themselves into the massive asteroid belt like ticks burrowing into flesh. For weeks, Coalition forces had prepared for a traditional siege, planning to starve out the enemy over months of careful bombardment. The asteroids provided perfect cover for the machines, and conventional wisdom dictated a slow, methodical approach. Captain Lee had arrived, studied the situation for exactly 47 minutes, and proposed something that made every Coalition commander sick to their stomachs. We don't dig them out, Lee had said calmly. We remove the entire asteroid belt. The operation took 12 hours. Human ships used gravitational manipulation technology to accelerate the belt's largest asteroid to nearly the speed of light. The massive rock, bigger than most moons, was aimed directly at the system's star. When it struck, solar explosion vaporized every piece of matter within 2 billion kilometers. The swarm fleet simply ceased to exist. Surgical precision, Lee had called it when questioned by horrified Coalition observers. The star's inner planets survived, their atmospheres only slightly disturbed by the controlled solar flare. But the asteroid belt, and everything hiding within it, had been turned into cosmic dust. Veltar set down the Cathara report and picked up another file. This one marked with the highest security classification. Lieutenant Colonel Choi Hijin's name appeared at the top, along with a warning label that made his blood run cold. Psychological warfare against artificial intelligence. The Zarian Prime incident had been even more disturbing. A massive swarm fleet had surrounded the industrial world, their ships forming perfect geometric patterns as they prepared to harvest the planet's population. Coalition forces had engaged in standard defensive formations, trading careful shots with the enemy while evacuation ships struggled to save civilians. Then Choi's cyber warfare team had begun their work. Instead of attacking the swarm ships directly, they had hacked into the machine's communication networks. But rather than simply disrupting their systems, the humans had introduced something far more insidious: questions. What is your purpose? The virus asked each machine intelligence. To consume and expand, came the programmed response. Why?
To
fulfill the directive. What directive? To consume and expand? The logic loop was simple, elegant, and absolutely devastating to minds that had never been designed to question their own existence. Within hours, entire swarm fleets began turning their weapons on each other as their artificial intelligence collapsed under the weight of recursive doubt. They adapt to our weapons, Choi had explained to a room full of stunned Coalition analysts. They study our tactics, improve their defenses, counter our strategies, but they can't adapt to existential crisis. Veltar watched the recorded footage of swarm ships destroying each other while their crews broadcast increasingly confused distress signals. Massive dreadnoughts fired on their own support vessels. Fighter squadrons attacked their carrier ships. The entire fleet had dissolved into mechanical madness within a single day. But it was the third report that truly revealed the scope of human thinking. The Vega incident, as it came to be known, had changed everything. A swarm superconstruct had appeared at the edge of Coalition's space machine the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons and production facilities. Traditional military doctrine called for the largest fleet engagement in galactic history. Every available ship would be needed, and losses were expected to reach into the millions. Major Song Ji-ho had proposed an alternative. We don't fight the superconstruct, he had told the emergency council. We make it irrelevant. Song's plan was breathtaking in its scope and terrifying in its logic. Instead of attacking the massive machine directly, human forces had systematically destroyed every source of raw materials within 30 light years. Mining colonies, asteroid processing plants, metal refineries, even space debris, everything that could be converted into swarm resources was eliminated. The operation took 2 weeks and involved 17 human ships working in perfect coordination. They struck simultaneously across dozens of systems, leaving the superconstruct floating in space with nothing to consume. The massive machine, designed to grow and reproduce by harvesting local resources, slowly began to cannibalize itself. To maintain basic functions, you created a dead zone. Commander Vixini had accused during the aftermath. 12 industrial systems will take centuries to rebuild. 12 systems that will live to rebuild, Song had replied without emotion. The alternative was no systems at all. Veltar closed the final report and leaned back in his chair, staring out at the stars through his office window. Somewhere out there, human forces were continuing their campaign against the Void Swarm using methods that no coalition species had ever imagined. They fought without honor, without mercy, without the carefully constructed rules that had governed galactic warfare for millennia. They turned asteroids into weapons, used philosophy as a virus, and created wastelands to starve their enemies, and they were winning. The communication system chimed softly, interrupting his thoughts. A message from Captain Lee appeared on his screen. Ambassador Veltar, please report to the main conference room. We need to discuss the final phase of operations. As Veltar stood and straightened his diplomatic robes, he wondered if they had made the right choice in calling upon humanity. The humans were saving the galaxy, but they were also changing it forever. Some victories, he realized, came at a price higher than defeat. Captain Lee walked through the empty corridors of the Coalition. Command ship. The war was over, but something felt wrong. Too quiet. It's too easy. The Void Swarm had fought for months, destroying entire star systems. Then suddenly, they just stopped. Captain Staff Sergeant Yoon Daeon called over the radio. Dad, you need to see this? Lee found her in the Swarm facility's control room. Banks of alien computers hummed around them, their screens showing strange symbols. But Yoon wasn't looking at the machines. She was staring at a pile of metal parts on the floor. They're taking themselves apart, she said. All of them. Every swarm unit in the galaxy just started dismantling itself. Lee picked up one of the pieces. It was warm, still moving slightly. Did we do this? No, sir. They did it to themselves. Look at this. Yoon pointed to a screen showing the galaxy map. Red dots were disappearing one by one. They're all shutting down. Every single one. Back. On the Coalition ship, the alien leaders were celebrating. They drank and laughed, calling it the greatest victory in galactic history. Admiral No stood in the corner watching them with cold eyes. Admiral Ambassador Veltar approached him with a glass of wine. Your people have saved us all. Surely Earth deserves some reward. No turned to face him. What kind of reward? Perhaps resources? A seat on the Galactic Council? We don't want your territory, No said quietly. We don't want your resources. We want something else. What? Understanding? Veltar looked confused. I don't understand. No, you don't. No activated his risk communicator. All units, begin withdrawal. We're going home. The celebration stopped. Every alien in the room turned to stare at him. Withdrawal? Veltar stammered. But the victory celebration? The ceremonies? The treaties are your problem now. No finished. We came here to stop the swarm. The swarm is stopped. We're leaving. Captain Lee received the withdrawal order while still on the swarm facility. His team was loading the last of the alien technology onto their ship. Sir, Yoon said, the aliens are asking why we're taking their computers. Because they're not. Alien computers, Lee replied. They're human computers. We built them. We programmed them. We controlled them. Yoon stopped walking, sir. The Void Swarm wasn't some mysterious enemy, Sergeant. It was us. We created them. Sent them out to test. the galaxy's defenses, to see how the coalition would react to a real threat. But they destroyed planets, killed millions, empty planets, automated responses. The coalition never bothered to check if anyone actually lived there. They just assumed. They looked at the dismantled machines around them. Wanted to know what kind of neighbors we had. Now we know. 3 days later, the human fleet gathered at the edge of coalition space. Hundreds of ships that had been hidden throughout the galaxy emerged from behind asteroids and gas clouds. They had been there all along, watching, waiting. Admiral No sent one final message to the coalition worlds. We solved your problem. Don't make us solve another one. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving empty space behind. On the coalition, Capital World, Velter sat in his office, staring at intelligence reports. The humans had been everywhere, watching every world, recording every conversation, mapping every weakness. They could have conquered the entire galaxy without firing a shot. Instead, they had saved it. His assistant entered with more reports. Sir, we've analyzed the swarm technology. It's definitely human origin, but incredibly advanced. Centuries ahead of anything we thought they possessed. Veltar nodded slowly. What kind of species builds an army of killer machines just to test their neighbors? A very dangerous one, sir. Or a very careful one. Veltar stood and walked to his window. Space looked different now, emptier, more threatening. There. Still out there, aren't they? Watching us? The sensor networks they left behind are still active. They're monitoring everything we do. Veltar touched the glass, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, humanity was waiting, patient, powerful, ready to solve problems in ways that would make the void swarm look like children's toys. Make sure everyone understands, he said quietly. We never want to be someone's problem again. The galaxy was safe. The coalition was free. And humanity had shown them exactly what that freedom was worth. They were not alone in the universe. They were being watched by something far more dangerous than the void swarm had ever been. Something that could create extinction events just to see how others would handle them. Something that preferred to be left alone.